Hello campers, and welcome back to our tour of the Albion Landscape Zodiac. After listening to Chapter 12 of Behold Jerusalem on Easter Sunday, which can now be found in my Albion Landscape Zodiac playlist, Jilly Bling decided she would like to drive all over the face of the Christ on the cross. Now, I'm going to refer to this as Christ on the cross and as a Christian symbol, even though I know it isn't. But more on that maybe later in this video or in another video. So, we found a campsite just outside Temple Sowerby in the Eden Valley. Although we don't require a campsite, it does have some advantages such as fresh water on tap, electric hookup, and wastewater disposal, as well as providing a bit of extra security and peace of mind whilst parked up overnight. So I'm going to start this video straight into the dash cam footage from the first day. So after we've had our first night on site, and I spotted a church, the Church of St. Lawrence in Kirkland, and it had always been a plan of mine to visit a church that shared my given Christian name. And what better place to do that than on the face of the most Christian of symbols of Christ on the cross. I guess neither of us really knew what to expect from our visits to the area, as we had planned to purchase our motorhome long before I started my YouTube channel and my awareness of the Albion Zodiac. We were really just looking for different places to travel to and experience around Great Britain, because although we have lived in Britain all our lives, we've never really seen it much. So it was it gives us a good excuse to go around and travel around, and so this is just really a record of our travels. This little church would have once been a busy place on a Sunday morning in the past, but this Sunday found us with the building to ourselves. Although there was a gentleman that arrived as we were leaving, and he was recalling happy days when his daughter, who lived at Glebe Farm next door, had held a wedding service some years earlier. He now sought a quiet space to contemplate the passing of his wife. I never knew Glebe Farm. It's actually a farm that's reserved for its work is done for the benefit of the vicar or the priest of the parish. It's for the parish church. So Glebe Farm is like, I suppose, saying church farm, and that's exactly where his daughter lived. So as with newspapers, churches once bore witness to all hatches, matches and dispatches of their community, as well as providing a focal point at least once a week. Both Jill and myself do have a fascination with churches, actually, but even more so nowadays, now that I see that, these places, they're not built for the likes of you and me. They're not churches, they're not religious really places, but they're certainly not built for 6 foot tall people. The doors are ginormous, the entrances are ginormous, the windows are ginormous, the internal spaces are ginormous. The whole thing just stinks of his story. From Kirkland, we crossed the chin of this head in the landscape, and headed towards the nose and onto the dry left eye of Melmerby. Just a quick point though, we did pass through a village of Ousby, which is probably the only point between shorter ways you could go. It's the only village en route from Kirkland to Melmerby. Ousby had an interesting sign outside that neither of us had heard of before. It was a doubly thankful village, in that during the First World War they were thankful that none of the sons of the village were, well, they all came back alive, so they were thankful after the First World War, and they were also thankful after the Second World War because all their sons had come back alive. And apparently there is literally only a handful of doubly thankful villages, and there weren't that many thankful villages in the first place in either war. Just an interesting fact we spotted on the route. So in Melmerby, which, as I say, is the sort of the tear duct of the left eye of this face, and the A686 forms the line of the eye from this point going east. We actually parked up outside the Shepherd's Inn, and we found a little bush shelter on the main road, which acted as a sort of a charity shop or library or both, where you could make donations and take books away, or deposit books for charity there, and the funds there going to local charity. And we had a little walk around the village, and just behind the old village bakery, which I think now is a sort of tea room and a little shop as well, boutique I should say, it's a little boutique. Just behind that we actually found the toy works, which was a little carpentry shop, if I say that, carpentry shop, where he's made toys in there, and so we purchased some early Christmas presents, I suppose, bought early for Christmas. Now, the relevance of finding a carpenter's workshop and a shepherd's inn on the face of this Christianized symbol, let's say, was not wasted on us. So after our little stop, we drove on a little further. I mean, we're literally talking 4 miles to Hunsonby, to go and find the wet eye, the Melmerby being the dry eye, and the Robberby Water being the wet eye. Unfortunately, Hunsonby didn't really offer me anywhere to park, and so I had to sort of turn around, go back on myself slightly, sort of almost circling the eye, to find a little spot that we could pull up, take a few pictures and have a cup of tea. It's great when you can just pull up anywhere and have a fresh brew or a bite to eat. After all, I've brought the kitchen sink with me, along with the shower, the toilet, the double bed. Now, the question of how high you need to be to actually see these symbols in the landscape is always on the back of my mind. And I'm sure people, if you're new here, you'll say, how high do you need to be to see this symbol? Well, so this figure on the cross we're talking is 48 miles from head to toe, and his face is probably about maybe 10 miles wide, 10 miles high. The problem is you can't actually see it. You can't see it from the ground, and you probably wouldn't recognize it from the air. The only time you actually can see is when you've got a map in front of you and you've got it plotted out on the map, drawn out on the map for you. and that's the only really the time you'll see it. Other than, on the coastline, yes, you can see it's clearly that, like the Anglesey is the head of Virgo. There is no disputing that. You can see that clear as day. But actually the features within the landscape only become revealed on a map and with the knowledge. So the River Robberby Water is clearly marked on the map, but even if you were driving down the main road, you probably wouldn't even see it. Even if you went over the bridge, you hardly see it either. But it's there, it's on the map, and it's clear enough to see on there. So after our cup of tea, we headed north only a short distance towards Glastonbury, but stopping just short of Glastonbury at Long Meg and her daughters, which apparently is the second largest stone circle in England, although I have heard that said about a number of stone circles. They're all the second largest, never the first one. I don't know which one that one is, but they're always the second largest, and it depends how you measure them, I suppose. Whether you're measuring circumference, diameter, height, who knows how they're measuring that. But for me, I wasn't really interested in the stone circle itself. What I was looking for was about 2 miles further down the track, which there was no way you could get a vehicle down there. You'd even probably struggle to get a bicycle down there. Farm tractor maybe, but not a bicycle. You might get a quad bike. I think there was somebody on a off-road motorbike past us. So we trudged on for 2 miles to the banks of the River Eden, just downstream from where Robberby Water joined it. And there's a bend in the river and a little gem of a series of cave rooms with a beautiful aspect over the river, known as Lacy's Caves. It was a bit of an orienteering mission on the way to the cave, as there probably was a better route, and in fact the route out was slightly better. So these were fascinating little 5-room complex, 5 cave rooms. Well, that's what we could see anyway. I'm sure there was a lot more, and looking at the floor, I'm sure, like my like my cave visit in Cyprus, the floor could probably have gone down another 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60 foot. Who knows how deep it actually went. This is just the bit that we're allowed to see in this bright red sandstone. Lots of fascinating sort of features in the stone itself. There was a lot of raised areas, and I'm not sure whether that was sort of like a weather worn around, like vines, ivy, creepers, anything that sort of like climbed up the wall plant wise. Those green patches just above the floor level. Now, I believe these patches of green are from basically where the caves have been flooded with water, either from rain or, well, generally from rain, really, gathering on the floor and then seeping out. So it was dry on the day we were there, but obviously this green patches to me is sort of like an algae that's grown in a very wet or moist area, but it's only at the bottom of the wall, so it for me implies that there's obviously been water, standing water in there, and it's sort of like as the water's drained out, this algae is sort of like nicely grown on the bottom of the wall. So we left on the riverside walk rather than the overfield walk that we arrived by, and caught a glimpse of the Settle to Carlisle Railway as we walked along the riverbank. And then we came across a disused mine. This was actually the Long Meg mine, and apparently it was in operation from around 1880 to 1976, where they extracted around 5 million tonnes of anhydrite or calcium sulfate, which initially sounds a lot, but this approximately equates to 1 cubic metre per man hour worked, and would be the equivalent to 1 square kilometre at 2 metres deep in 100 years, or a tunnel of approximately 600 kilometres long at 2 metres wide by 2 metres high, which is 450 miles at 6 foot by 6 foot, assuming that you had a pure seam with no slag. So it's more than possible that the Long Meg Gipsum mine, for its full name, touched or reached the Kirby Thorn mine, which is less than 14 kilometres or 8 miles away, and has been in operation for over 200 years, apparently. So the footpath was passable with care. It turned out we were actually on the disused railway line that serviced the mine itself. But the mine itself was blocked up, and there was a fenced off area that looked like a loading or the area for the freight trains that would have obviously run down this service line to the mine. And after about our 3-mile walk back to the van, as it was longer and all uphill, it just seemed to go on forever, we got back to the van and had some food, a drink, cup of tea. As I say, kitchen sink and the cooker, the stove is there, we'll do what you like. And so we made our way back to Temple Salby via Penrith, and I'm gonna show you a little bit of the dash cam footage. I'm going to slow it down as we get to Penrith, and just put it at run at normal speed just as we travel through Market Square, and just to give you a little glimpse, a little taster of what's coming up, because obviously we did make time to go to Penrith as well later on during our stay. For those of you familiar with the Graham K. Griffiths book, Behold Jerusalem, which I assume is all of you if you're watching at this point, which I did actually share in the Albion Landscape Zodiac playlist, or renamed it, you will recognise the images that I am showing here. And the last two chapters, if you got that far, I know it was a very long watch, read, whatever, but well worth it. So the last two chapters on the Dark Twin and the Lord of the Dance overlay, well, the Dark Twin overlays on the image of the Christ, if we want to call that the hijacked image that now represents Christ, and becomes a third person, the Lord of the Dance. So this is kind of almost a trinity, which is not a Christian or any other religious teaching. The Christians don't have a trinity. That's hijacked from the Mystery Babylon and the worship of the sun god Tammuz. So his father Nimrod and Tammuz, the son, who was conceived after his father's death, so therefore was a virgin birth to his mother, allegedly. Yeah, that's the Holy Trinity. That's the Holy Family. Is Nimrod, Tammuz, and his mother, whose name forgets me, but you see her every day if you go past Starbucks. That is her image on the front of Starbucks. So yes, you'll be aware of these, and just note how the face overlaps. That the hair of the first person becomes the chin of the second person, and so there's a lot of shared borders, shared lines, which again, intelligence of design. The fact that the two people on the cross become a third, a single person when overlaid is just fantastic. Like I say, the intelligence of that, the whole design, just shows that it's not natural. You cannot have that many coincidences. And that's what I say about the whole thing, the whole Albion Zodiac. There are too many coincidences for it to be, oh, it's just natural, it's erosion, and yeah, not what I believe. So on the Monday morning, we set off to Green Reservoir, which is referenced in chapter 15 of Behold Jerusalem, and is the yin to Haikup Nix Yang, as it were. There's also an interesting feature just south of the reservoir called Cauldron's Snout, which is where the water leaving the reservoir flows through a very tight gap, I suppose, and forms a waterfall at that point. Unfortunately, due to the weather and the distance that we'd have had to walk to get there from the car park on the moortop in the drizzle, we actually decided not to go and view Cauldron Snout on this particular trip. I'm sure we'll be going back again when the weather is better. I keep saying that. So Graham K. Griffiths is referencing Green Reservoir as the equivalent to the cut on the Christ. So he has Haikup Nick, which is allegedly the wound while Christ is on the cross, and it is an amazing shaped valley. That valley at Haikup Nick, it just looks like a spearhead, even though it is 4 miles long, the spearhead. So as I say, the size, when you start looking at things, just gets a bit daunting sometimes. And Green Reservoir is in the position that would be the same spot on the dark twin, as he calls it. Now, he's not the only one to refer to this as associated with the Holy Grail. So if the Holy Grail was there to capture the blood from the wound on the cross, then that becomes the Holy Grail. Now, there is suggestion that it's not a cup, that it's actually a bowl, and it's sort of like the bowl from when Joseph of Arimathea was actually sort of cleaning him up in the tomb, or he actually stood under the cross with a bowl rather than a cup to catch the blood of the Christ on the cross. So if then the dark twin has got a reciprocal wound, this then would be the equivalent to the nick, and so associated again with the Holy Grail. And interestingly enough, then we have Graham Phillips in his book The Search for the Holy Grail, that is also pointing at Green Reservoir and the cauldron snout as being possibly associated with the Holy Grail, or even the Holy Grail itself being a cauldron or a bowl, or any number of particular relics associated with Christ on the cross or Christ himself as being the Holy Grail, or rather than the Holy Grail, any number of them are associated as a Holy Grail. I suppose if we go and have a look at the Da Vinci Code, then we're saying that the Holy Grail is actually the Holy Bloodline, which again, we're coming back to blood and the blood of Christ, and yeah. So, so we stopped en route to Green Reservoir at the summit of Hartside Pass, which we stopped to go and admire the view in the drizzle. And as we got there, it was a bit of an impromptu stop. So the signpost said that it was 1,903 feet above sea level. And of course, so I missed it, and I turned into the next turn, lay-by, to turn round and come back. But on the dash cam, you will notice that the top 3 foot is soil, and below that we have this plateau, I would say, of geopolymer. Now, this was very visible, this plateau, in the valley of High Cup Nick. And it's visible everywhere. When you go and look at a hill or a mountain that's got, especially the higher ones, they're exposed, the sides are exposed, you see this layer, this plateau of rock on the top. Now, what I'm suggesting that is actually geopolymer, and it's like the roof of a room. And so where the valleys are, the roof has collapsed almost into the valley. Now, when this stone actually erodes, or through water damage or whatever, however this erosion takes place, we're told that it sort of seeps in through the rock, and then you get the frost, and it's because it seeped in, the water expands and it breaks the rocks off. But they all break in vertical splits. So I suppose, yeah, it could be the water going down, or it could just, I don't know how the actual, how they're actually made up, as it were. You just see the layers being horizontal, but when it's split comes, they're vertical. And I noticed this in Scotland, and I'm noticing it everywhere. And I'm noticing these plateau stones, even the mountains in Scotland, you can see it just below the top, the peaks, the summits, you get this line of rock. And to me, if you're the geologist telling me that that's come up, that was formed at the bottom, of a seabed, which was quite deep, obviously to get the pressure to form the rock, then it's risen through being pushed up. That slab pushed up without breaking. I'm not buying that, buddy. Sorry. That's my Cypriot friend's favourite saying. It's also my name on Twitter is I don't buy that, buddy. So here's the view from the top of Hartside Pass. We enjoyed it. We had a cup of tea. Okay. So as we leave the summit of Hartside Pass, then we're passing from Cumbria on the windward side of the Pennines. We notice how Durham County on the leeward side of the Pennines has a higher cloud ceiling. This might seem obvious, or it might not. But what this means is that the prevailing climate on the west side of the spine of England, the Pennines, is generally speaking more humid than on the eastern side. But did you know that this actually influenced industry? Again, this might seem obvious to you, but as we're entered what we're told was the Industrial Revolution period, industrialists took advantage of the conditions. For example, the moist windward side, the conditions were most suitable for the production of cotton, which was probably why Liverpool and Manchester became ports that they did, and so important, as the cotton was imported from plantations in the Americas, maybe to the west. Very handy because we're on the west side of the Pennines. The conditions on the leeward side, the east side, were less suitable for cotton production. So in these areas, it was the production of wool and the woolen mills. So the likes of Durham and Yorkshire became the woolen industry, whereas Lancashire and Cumbria were more associated with the cotton industry. So we're travelling along here. As we're travelling along, it's not noticeable generally at this point, but you might notice that the road, as we drive along, undulates. There's peaks and troughs. It's quite unnoticeable. Now, you may call me an absolute idiot or whatever, which I probably am. And you'll say that this is the water running off the landscape. Now, it's my belief that we've had a series of cataclysmic events that have all kind of been rolled into one, calling it a mud flood. So if there was a cataclysmic event that actually deposited ash onto the landscape, and then years later, after being buried in this ash, there's all of a sudden another cataclysmic event, such as, like, I won't say biblical flood, but such as a flood, receding ice lakes, the last mini ice age, whatever, and lakes were formed and washed over the landscape, then you'd get this ripple effect. And so you can see it in the landscape. If you're looking for it, it shows up very clearly on the LiDAR. So anyway, as we approach Green Reservoir, it was very drizzly, a bit wet. So we didn't really fancy the walk down to the Cauldron's Snout, partly because of the weather, partly because we're not as fit as we once were, which we need to work on as well. But I keep blaming the weather, don't I? What do I expect? I'm on top of the Pennines. We've sort of come back on ourselves slightly as well at this point, so we're back to the ridge of the Pennines. So that's why it's still kind of misty, although it's slightly lower than the ridge, the highest point. So the cloud ceiling is slightly higher because it raises up as the clouds roll in off like the Irish Sea. They hit the Pennines and they have to go up. They're forced up, and this kind of then would explain why it's more humid, damp, etc. on that side of the Pennines, as that is the prevailing wind is from the west. And so yeah, we'd stopped. We had cups of tea, a bit of food, etc. at Cow Green, which was surrounded by apparently disused mines as well, which we weren't necessarily aware of. Mines and quarries, let's say. But, you know, if you're a conspiracy finder, I won't say theorist, because they're proving to not be just theories, but actually the truth behind everything, then you'll know that sort of quarries and mines generally appear where there's something and they want to get rid of it and dig it up. And or the stone was very good. The stone they used to build like the star forts is, when we went to Berwick upon Tweed, the quality of that stone, it was fantastic. And this is generally what quarries are viewed to be by many, is actually the removal and the breaking up of these fantastic bits of stone, whether they'd be, well, who knows when they were built, or megalithic, these, which I still believe are geopolymer as well. The stone quality is it's fantastic. So it's almost as if they're digging up the past to bury it, or burying it, or just destroying it, which I'm sure many of you believe too. So this is actually just us now retracing our steps back to Hartside Hartside Pass. And as you see, the cloud has lifted from here as well. It's cleared up a bit. So as we approach and we pull into the Hartside Pass, the summit car park, we'll find a slightly better view. Now, I think at this point, I managed to, and when we were parked up, managed to knock the wire out of the dash cam. So after the view from the top of Hartside Moor, we did drive on to Kirkoswald, but there's not much footage on the run up onto that. But I'll just let this now run up to the summit. We're nearly there, and there's the geopolymer behind the truck there on the right hand side, and we'll just come back up to the summit for the view. Again, another cup of tea. But this time we did have a bit of a brew with a view. Still cloudy, but less cloudy than it was when we first stopped here. So from the top of Hartside Pass, we set off to Kirkoswald, which returns us back to the face, and the top of the face, at the very top of the head, in fact, on the parting of the hair. So as we got to Kirkoswald, we were confronted with a bell tower of red sandstone on top of a hill. Now, there was a time that I would have just accepted that building a small tower on top of a hill was a wonderful saving of resources, as you don't need to build a high tower to obtain overall high position. But these days, I just want to scan the whole hill with ground penetrating radar to settle my curiosity and prove that there isn't a buried church or other buildings underneath that hill. As it is, the church is just there at the top left of the picture. So the church has no tower, the tower's on the hill, and the church is at the bottom of the hill. So I'm going to pan around and just show you the lay of the land here. It's just like this pimple with a tower on the top. But yeah, and so in my previous video, we visited Ravenstone Park, and we were told the story of the folly on top of the hill, the arch, that had been built deliberately as a folly in a ruined form. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. It possibly is in terms of Ravenstone Park. And so anyway, as I pan round here, we'll see there's a little doorway into the tower, and there is a little inscription telling us a little bit about the false narrative above the door, which I won't go into. So anyway, there is a castle in Kirkoswald, and it's just up the road. In fact, as I pan round, you'll see that clump of trees there. That's the site of Kirkoswald Castle. And it almost looks like false ruins, or I was going to say that. So here's where the bell tower is, and here's the remains of the castle. Now, I was going to say that it felt like Kirkoswald Castle was like one of these false ruins, like we'd seen at Ravenstone Park. However, on rerunning the footage here before recording the script and the voiceover that I'm doing now, I did notice that there is a footprint in the ground as we get to the coppice, as we get to the trees here. You'll see that there are indentations, walls that have been, well, presumably robbed out now. And anyway, but here we go. We have a tower left. I mean, why would you take all the walls down and leave the tower? There's a question to ask. I don't know. But yeah, just the whole thing sometimes just seems wrong. That this narrative that we're given by the gatekeepers, that these sites, well, it fell into disrepair and blah de blah, and yeah, I don't know, and I don't think we will ever truly know why the walls have been taken down and the castle and the tower has been left standing, nor will we know what's under that little hill. As we pan round, you'll see it in the distance, the bell tower, unless we go with a spade or with our ground penetrating radar and go and take a look. I did fly over this. They're quite thick walls. It reminded me a bit of Gimginiani, if I pronounce that right, in Italy, where you have the skyscrapers, the towers, where all the families competed, and it sort of reminded me of a base of one of the towers, really, because the walls are very thick on those towers at the base, and they get thinner and thinner as they go up. So should this tower be twice as high, 3 times as high? I don't know. Just an observation. But yeah, so there's the tower. This is Kirkoswald Castle. And we're right on the top of the face. And we're at the parting of the hare, really. The road running through Kirkoswald actually forms the perfect parting for the hare. And I'll show you that at the end of this little drone footage sequence. And there's Kirkoswald over in the distance now. And I'm going to fly back to the little pimple just there with the bell tower on the top of it. Lovely countryside. And I didn't even know these places were there before we got to the point. I was just going for the parting of the hair on the face, and let's say confronted with this red sandstone tower on top of a hill. I mean, if it was any shorter, it would just be a red sandstone hut. Never mind a tower. There's probably not even enough space in there to actually get a good swing on the bell rope. I don't know. It just, the whole thing just stinks, doesn't it? So this is flying over a I'm sure that's Freemason's house, that one, with the lovely garden there. Over into the little village itself of Kirkoswald, we've got there's a water mill there. You can see the water wheel, and there's a sawmill just a bit further upstream from there. So that's to the right of our current view. And as we fly down the main road, we're going to pass over the cross, which, as previously stated, this is the cross, the exchange. And here we are at the bend in the road. That bit going straight up now is the cycle route, but that's the main road there. And turning back, the drone actually told me that I was running out of space on the memory card at this point, which is fair enough. It's a very clever little thing. Tells you when it's running out of battery and tells you that it needs to come home. Tells you that it's running out of space on the memory card. So here, yeah, just a little overhead view of the cross there, and the sawmill off now to the left. Flying over the watermill and back to where we're parked, just next to this little car park. The road directly in front of us now becomes the line of the parting down the face, and that's the road to Glastonbury, heading south. And here we go. So here's the B6413 and the road to Glastonbury form the perfect parting in the hair on the face of whoever it is. And so we set off now down the road down towards Glastonbury. Unfortunately, Glastonbury proved to be rather an even smaller village than Kirkoswald, with even less opportunity to actually park. So after resetting the sat nav, we drove on. Now this then brings us back to this point here. We're now, from yesterday's journey, we're now passing Long Meg and her sisters are on the right hand side now, and we're heading back down towards Penrith, and we'll be stopping in Penrith, and I will be showing you the central point, the exchange point, the cross of Market Square, and it's known as Musgrave Monument. And as I say, there's more details on that in my fourth Starfort video on crosses and exchanges and how these are all distanced in meters apart from each other, which, I mean, this concept of being kilometers apart from each other rather than miles apart from each other in England, where we've used miles for forever, well, since the Romans allegedly. Yeah, so here we come now into Musgrave, and we've passed it. Musgrave Monument in the exchange at the cross. What I actually did was go around this car park and back into Morrison's car park, and actually sent up the drone for some footage around the town centre, which I'm going to go through now for you. Initially, I'm heading off towards the railway station there on the right hand side, and then the castle. This is Penrith Castle, the ruins of. Yeah. If you're going to rob it. If you're not, it's why have we got half a castle? Why? I mean, it looks like they've probably excavated part of that now on the roadside there. That's probably buried walls, with the bits just standing out. I don't know. Who knows, really? And we've got a square moat on this. And then that's over now towards Penrith. And as I say, I'm going to go and fly the drone over Market Square, and which interestingly is, as I think I pointed out earlier, surrounded by the banks so that they can hold your money for you. What nice people those bankers are. Yeah, and as soon as you deposit, it's no longer your money. A deposit in the bank belongs to the bank, not to you. And since 2009, since 2009, if the bank goes bust, we don't bail them out. We are now bailed in. So if a bank, financial institution, goes bust these days, then we are all liable for the debt. Not the bankers, not the shareholders, the public. We have been bailed in. Your government has bailed you in to the banking crisis, and oh boy did they know it was coming back in 2009. And in 2019 it hit. We are now in the worst banking situation ever. The banks are literally being propped up by more debt. The US government have just raised their debt ceiling so that they can keep pumping money into the system. This system is dead, and they're pumping the money in, and it's a waste of time. The banks have failed. The whole system is about to collapse. The dollar is about to collapse. Russia and China are now buying and selling oil in gold and precious metals, gold and silver. They ain't using the petrodollar, which, if the petrodollar isn't being used, then the petrodollar has no value in this world anymore. But anyway, enough doom and gloom. So this is Barclays Bank at the front with the little green towers on, just in front of the church, capturing all your money. And we have the Musgrave clock tower, Musgrave monument. I think I've been saying Musgrave, which is a clock tower dedicated to the son Philip Musgrave, who died in May 1859 in Madrid. And the monument was allegedly erected in 1861, a tribute from the town and neighbourhood of their high regards and esteem to Sir George and Lady Musgrave. You know, those landlords that stole the land off them. I'm being attacked by the pigeons here as I fly around. But yeah, this is central Penrith. Unfortunately, as I say, that the pigeons were getting at me at the drone, and even the seagulls started joining in. So at this point, I basically flew back to the car park and we moved on. So after leaving Penrith, we headed off towards the A66, which ended up being a little bit chock-a-block. I don't know whether it was an accident or whether it was just because it was the time of day it was. I'm sure that it was an accident, and it's not normally so clogged up. We, like I say, we headed off towards Temple Sowerby down the A66, and I decided to come off and stop at Brougham Castle, just at the side, just outside Penrith, and take some drone footage. So here we go. Send the drone up and head off over towards the castle. And I'm just going to let this play for a little bit while I go and make a cup of tea. So after leaving Broome Castle, we did get stuck in the traffic again down the country lanes, and I've removed the 40 minutes of us being actually going nowhere, and I sort of had to turn around on myself just to get back to where I was before we got stuck, which was here, and then go down the back roads back to Temple Sowerby. And so en route, we did travel down the Eden Valley a little bit more, and past a lovely large house, a large estate. Unfortunately, there was nowhere to pull over to take photos, and it was just a little bit too far for the drone to actually get to it from the campsite itself. Although I did send the drone up, and I'm going to do you a little bit more drone footage, just of the surrounding around the campsite, and with a little bit of music there to accompany it. Tuesday morning arrived, and it was time for us to head off for home. So first port of call was go and get a bit of fuel from just down the road, and then we turned around and headed back to the route we'd travelled to the campsite the evening before yesterday, which is just here, and headed down the country lanes. And we decided that as we were passing, we would actually head off towards Ullswater, which was on the edge of the cross, and this also then becomes the base of Aquarius, because up until now we've technically been on Aries or in Aries, albeit on the cross that Aries holds aloft. So we headed off down the back roads, and as we were travelling, we spotted a sign for King Arthur's Round Table,
and then decided that we might actually want to go and see it. However, we did get stuck on some temporary lights, and I then had to go around the roundabout and back through the temporary lights. So it was signposted just beyond the turn, but then we missed it, or there wasn't an opportunity to stop, so we ended up travelling on, and it's not too far, and we will be heading towards Ullswater. And I think I just pulled over just to check the sat nav was going right. More temporary roadworks. And then pulled over, had a cup of tea, and sent up the drone. So while I'm just, before I set the drone up, set the image off for the drone, I'll just show you what we mean in terms of Ullswater being the edge of the cross, and Aries in Aries, and also then the base of Aquarius. So let's first bring in the figure on the cross, and on the left of the cross we see Ullswater and Ullswater. Now these then become the bottom left part flames of Aquarius, which is the phoenix in the pyre. And there you go. So at the bottom left corner we have Ullswater and Ullswater. So we're effectively looking south now. This is Ullswater from the drone, and so looking south, these would then be the fingertips of the figure on the cross. Interesting thought. Could we perhaps get his fingerprints off the top of the hills? Maybe not. And then looking over towards the west, and the Ullswater actually sort of does a right angle there and goes behind that and down to the south, and panning round. So this is the north side of Ullswater, which forms the sort of the top edge of the cross, or the bottom of the flame of the pyre. And so turning round towards the east, and we've got the steamer, or what would have been a steamer. I'm sure they're diesel now, or whatever they use. So I thought I'd go and have a quick little buzz around the boat. Again, we're sort of looking at the fingertips of the figure on the cross, and in the distance, I think you can see a second one coming around. They'll be crossing in the middle of Ullswater. And if I'd had the sound on, you would have heard a jet coming straight at us. And I'm going to try and stop the footage so you can see. There it goes. Wham. So from our lakeside spot, although it was obscured by trees for us, we drove on following Ullswater, and then we actually pulled in ourselves just to have a quick lakeside view ourselves, and then we continued on, heading towards Windermere. The size of our van, again, sort of determined where we could actually stop, and we weren't able to actually stop in Glen Riding, which is on the shoreline here of Ullswater, but we cracked on, and as I say, we headed up towards Windermere, through the Kirkstone Pass. Now, as we're driving along, and as you've probably been aware of all these dry stone walls at the side of the roads, virtually the whole of our trip has had walls at the side of the road. And as we come up to the top of this of the pass here, you'll see what I mean about the plateau of stone that we find all at the top of all of these mountains, and just to the side you can see it. And now we stopped here for an ice cream, and here's a little bit of a video clip showing the dry stone walls and where the stone comes from, because it all comes out of these plateaus as it splits and breaks. And this is the Kirkland Pass, Kirkstone, sorry, I say Kirkland, Kirkstone Pass in, and again, just panning round, and we stopped and had an ice cream while we were here and admired the view. Just about see, I believe that's Windermere, or it might be, it's Grasmere, I think, actually, down there in that little valley down there. But I'd say we headed off to Windermere. Now, fortunately, we have been to Windermere before. Again, the size of the vehicle means we're not able to just pull up anywhere. We do have to sort of try and find a car park without a height restriction, or with large enough spaces for us to actually fit in, because we're twice the length of a normal car. So a double bay, quite often, where people park nose to nose, we'll take two of those up and fit in quite nicely there. As you can see, I think you might notice on this a bit of the undulation I was talking about. I mean, people just would tell you that it's just water erosion. It's where the water's running off the hills, but it's on the level ground as well. It's there. You can see it, these ripples in the actual landscape. So this is Windermere going through. Now, there are some parking spaces I know of that we could have gone and parked in, and they'll allow 4 or 5 camper vans overnight. But we continued on. We did stop on the shore, and I did get the drone out, but it was a couple of miles down the road, as you can see here, where I pulled in. And there we go. And It's a rather interesting hill that we sat on. Looked very interesting. You'll notice it as the drone comes back here. But I sent the drone out over, this is Lake Windermere, and there was somebody having a nice little ride, sail around in their dinghy here. And I did go and buzz them, but as I get out to sort of about halfway out over Windermere here, I did a panoramic sweep around so you could actually see the view from sort of like the centre of the lake. You could see the edges. And as I came to the end of this sweep, when I get round back to about this point, there's you'll see the jet. You might just see the jet fly over. Again, there's no sound on the drone footage. I don't believe there's actually a mic on the drone itself, so it doesn't record sound, because otherwise you'd have got a thundering roar as the jet comes down. They obviously do fly up and down the lakes, practicing flying down the valleys for whatever reason. I don't know whether they're doing dam busters or it's just yeah, here comes the jet, and there he goes. It's gone already, I believe. So I went down and thought I'd go down and have a look at the dinghy while I was out over the lake, and I'll go now and fly to the dinghy. And then, as I say, on the return from going around the dinghy, you'll see that the hill that we're sat on is suspicious, I would say, in my mind at least. But you'd let me know what you think. And I'll just let this run for a little longer. So now in Aquarius, as we have been since Ullswater, we're heading off towards Barrow-in-Furness, or Furness. Barrow-in-Furness is how it's pronounced locally. So yeah, it does give that impression of the fire, the pyre. And as I said, Aquarius is the the phoenix rising out of the fire, being reborn, rebirth, as it appears on the landscape, inverted. It could almost be this phoenix is being, being born from the uterus, this big uterus that is the Lake District. But if we rotate it, then it becomes this this funeral fire. And as we're now on the actual coastline now, so we've got Morecambe Bay now to the left, as we drive down here, heading towards Barrow. And as we came into Barrow, I was reminded of Blake's words about dark satanic mills. The dominance of the wall of the BAE Systems Devonshire Dock Hall fills the skyline, dwarfing the surrounding houses. And again, the names given to the landscape sort of confirm that, Barrow-in-Furness, it's evocative of what we're actually seeing when we're looking at Aquarius. The Barrow, which is a burial mound on top of a pyre, a furnace, and the phoenix being reborn, and how poetic is the landscape, apart from the big dark satanic mill. If you care to open your eyes to the possibilities of it being by design, then I think you have to marvel in the wonder and the, as I say, the poeticness of the landscape. So anyway, we drove into Barrow and sort of through and out onto the headland, which becomes like the beak of the phoenix, with views across the Irish Sea. So from the beak of the phoenix, we then drove across the head, sort of under the eye, as it were, and headed off through Rose to Rampside, sort of behind the crest, as it were, of the phoenix. Just had to make a little stop at a little shop on the way, but then we basically, as I say, went to Rampside, where there was quite a little interesting, very narrow tower there, presumably some sort of beacon or lighthouse, and it looked very interesting, but I'm not entirely sure what it was for. So again, stop, have a little break, bit of tea. So from Rampside, we headed to Roe Island, down the causeway, as it were. Well, it's more than a causeway now. And we had a little stop and look around over to Piel Castle and Piel Island, which were apparently presented to the people of Barrow and District by the Duke of Buccleuch in 1920, as a war memorial to those who gave their lives in the Great War 1914 to 1918. So that was basically our last stop on our trip tour around Aries and Aquarius. I'm sure we'll be coming back. I'm certain of that. So we headed off following the coastline of Morecambe Bay Sands, heading towards the motorway and heading home. Now, next time on my tour video, we will be covering North Wales. We went down as far as Aberystwyth and then up the coast, and then inland actually to Lake Bala, and then out to the end of the Llyn Peninsula. Interestingly, while we were away, or just before we went away, I discovered Hugh Evans's star map in the landscape of North Wales. Now, the landscape star map that featured in Hugh's video Origins of the Zodiac, which is in my videos you might like to watch playlist on here on YouTube. The star map actually has constellations plotted out that are out of sight of Wales. They would never be in sight. They're below the ecliptic. They're in the southern hemisphere. I'm sorry if you're a flat earther and don't believe in the hemispheres. However, they are, for those people, they're the star constellations near the ice wall that can't be seen from Wales. You have to travel closer to the Antarctic to actually go and see them. So that's interesting discovery, and I'm sure I'll be covering that a lot more in the future, and I find it very interesting. And again, the landscape just screams to me of being man-made, and I'll explain that more in future videos. Please like, subscribe and share these videos. It does help, or it might help if they ever paid me out. Interestingly, if you'd like a Zodiac keyring with the Albion Zodiac on the reverse, I do have some. There should be links below this video. If I sell one of those a month, I will more than double my income from my YouTube channel. All proceeds gladly received. Thank you very much. And as I said, entering Barrow, I was reminded of Blake and the Jerusalem poem. And did those feet in ancient times walk upon England's mountains green, and was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen, and did the continents divine shine forth upon our clouded hills, and was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. I will not cease from mental fight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. Thank you.